facing this audience too.
When I'm dressed as the light of the
Good to go?
Yeah.
I had a terrible feeling all day when I didn't see the email in my inbox that this would be the result.
Yeah. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Good to go? All right, awesome. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for waiting. Technology is so fun, right? So to start, as we always start, well, first of all, this is our last reading of the series. We're running now fall 2025, but that also means that you're almost at the end of the semester. And for some of you, it's the end of your time at college. Yes, I'm looking at you, Lucas. Congratulations. Yeah. It's funny, one of the reasons I like using this room is because there's actually windows with a view, but we're at that time of the year where you really don't see anything except for reflections of ourselves, so that's nice too. But I'd like to start by acknowledging that the first people of this ancestral and unceded territory of the Chagwayavitam, the people of Chagwayanga, whose present day descendants are citizens of the Fernandino Tatavayam Band of Mission Indians, a land that is now occupied by our main campus. We honor their elders, past and present, and their descendants. We recognize that the tribe is still here, and we are committed to lifting up their stories, culture, and community. We're blessed today to have two poets, two multi-talented artists reading with us here, and we'll go one at a time. But I had the pleasure of working with both of them in Minneapolis and also at Milkweed Editions, who is the publisher for both of my books. So it's wonderful to have them here. We're going to start with Mary Austin Speaker, who is the author of Ceremony, published by Slope Editions. Also, The Bridge, published by Shearsman. 20 Love Poems for 10 Months, which is published by UDP. Necropastorals, which is published by Wooden Leg Press. And a play, I Am You This Morning, You Are Me Tonight, written with her husband, poet Chris Martin, with whom she lives in El Cerrito, California, with her 2 sons. She's the creative director of Milkweed Editions, where she oversees the cover and interior design of about 30 books per year, including both of my books, and edits on occasion. Her work has been included in the AIGA's 50 Books, 50 Covers list. And apart from her work at Milkweed, she's designed books for Ecco, Smithsonian, Simon & Schuster, Norton, The Song Cave, Graywolf, Coffeehouse Press, and others. I think, didn't you design the interior for Just Kids too? Is that, which is that's a flex. It's a big flex. Okay, please help me welcome to the podium Mary Austin Speaker. Okay.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having us out here, and it's such a joy to talk to art students. I am very envious. I never went to art school, and I always wish that I had, so you guys have it really good, and I think it's just wonderful to study art the whole time you're in school. So I'm going to read a few poems from The Bridge, which I talked a little bit about today. This is a book that I wrote in 2015, I think, or maybe a little before that. I wrote it, I think, in 2012. It was published in 2016. And I wrote it when I was anticipating leaving New York City after living there for just over a decade and commuting every day across the Manhattan Bridge from Brooklyn to Manhattan, where I worked for a book publisher. And I just wanted to memorialize that place that I loved so much because it was the place that I felt the most things when I lived in New York. So I came up with this vessel, which was a poem that had the same first and last lines. And then I would kind of fill up that vessel over the course of the train ride, and I wrote like 2 poems a day every day for about 6 months, and then kind of winnowed it down to this book. So I'm just going to read a little selection from this, and then I'll read some other poems. On the outskirts of the morning, fog, steel sky, brightening the auditory, we're all picked flowers nodding, our slender necks in all directions, because the clouds diffuse the light like a silk stocking widens the aperture, make it smaller and the room inverts. It's possible to be still between fits of sleep, and in the hour after the alarm when the light sprays in like a faraway wave on the outskirts of morning. The drama of crossing the bridge is amplified by the relentless pop song forged like a righteous hymn we travel through, cacophony of song bits and slow groanings of machines, each of us mysterious to ourselves. Our bodies tick their way across the bridge and back. The secret public shame of trying for the last seat on the train, all of us shabby predators looking for a break. To ride with rest as a companion is to fall in with the drama of the bridge. And now it's night, the other train a lit up stage, parading the tired at 8:43 p.m. Two girls gossip in Chinese, their dear dark hair in strings around their teenage faces. My hands are full of paper cuts from Spain. I leave a little of myself in every book, such generous letter forms, careful serifs. The smooth of well-made paper will always offer the most touchable glamour. I like it closer than the night's 10,000 eyes, dressing her buildings like a skin of glittering stones, like a darkened forge, like a closing cloak that offers itself every day, that this evening closes over us, curtain on a stage with spotlight trained on all of us poor workers running late at 8:43 p.m. of a 12-hour day, and now it's night. This is the last one I'll read from the bridge. And so we bravely go upward again into the day, boats shooting forth their wake, small cars and smaller people born for this, encountering repetitive day. We forge our difference from the way we on the subway stand in testament to everything being okay for now, all still a frozen piece of day. If we all had a louder instrument to play, then we could know who had more days to bravely go. That's bits from the bridge. Thank you so much. It's a really, really fun book to write, and I'm grateful that I stuck with it. Okay, and I'm going to read the rest of these off my phone because I did not bring the actual books with me. So I was telling Chris that I wrote these cowboy poems a long time ago when I was reading a lot of things about American nationhood and the idea of, and I was watching a lot of Westerns, and I'm from Texas, and all these things kind of got caught up in each other. And I was really interested in the archetype of the cowboy and how it would feel if that archetype started falling apart. So it has an epigraph called from Hank Williams Sr., and then I jumped in the river, but the river was dry. 1, high lonesome. The cowboy began alone, herding his 300 head. One day feedlots bloomed like black bruises on the sand-colored plains. And the cowboy couldn't unwild himself, and he couldn't make the feedlots wilder. So he looked at his hands and he broke his bread and struck out for sand-colored places where the wildness grew and he could marry himself to it. 2, when all the villains were gone. He began to daydream, 2 men squaring off in a hot parking lot, awful throwing its fumes up like applause. The asphalt glared hard and the cowboy went to meet his match, but his daydream failed him. After the first punch was thrown, the villain expanded into sand-colored earth and the wind carried him away. He barked openly at the sky, nothing sacred anymore, no what for, no why. 3, a great absence. The cowboy began to lose his bets when his song unraveled. There were the buffalo, the few horses left in the hills, kicking their dust over his blue beating heart, departing into the earth, thin and skittish as a vein of gold. His chest like a drum full of mud, just cold in the memory of being surrounded entirely by a lush, warm dark. To shake off all that want, to fly right into its terrible face. Okay, and then, so I've been trying to think a lot about how archetypes can kind of move from thing to thing. And I began writing these, I wrote a lot of astronaut poems as well after reading a lot of narratives about cosmonauts, super interesting stuff. And then I wrote these poems that sort of figured a market as an archetype. So this one's called A Rising Tide Lifts All Boats. I'm really interested in capitalism as personified in people, maybe villains. When I woke up, the market was hovering over the house next door. Small veins of lightning danced inside the market like a tiny poltergeist, as though the neighbors had made some terrible choice and brought the market upon themselves. The market lingered there for a long hour until everyone inside the house was filled with trepidation, and then it moved on, rolling its great boulders across the sky, daring anyone who crossed its path to try it. We thought we saw it disappear, but we were just kidding ourselves. The market wasn't going anywhere. It just changed shape. No longer was it gathered in a great puff of storm over a single house. Instead, it had thinned into mist and settled over all the nighttime neighborhoods, covering everything it touched, except a single house on a hill, bigger by far than the other houses, so big that it enjoyed an echelon of weather the rest of us couldn't understand, some kind of microclimate that involved the sea. The market lay on our town for days, soaking in, chilling the ground, and then it began to rain. It was a soft sprinkle at first, a whisper of rain, then a drizzle, then a steady pat, 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 and then a steady drumming for hours. The sewers filled first, and then the streets. The neighbors began climbing onto their roofs in their raincoats. The street lights went out one by one. And then this is another market poem. There's nothing like, it's called The Market Shapeshifts. There's nothing like disaster to get the market going. Beneath his black robe, his skin prickles with want when a hurricane begins rending the roofs from houses. The market peers into places he has never been welcome, imagining his next appearance, heroic, debonair. New technology for a new problem. What if you could be anything you wanted? Wouldn't you want to see everything that you could do? The market considers himself an optimist, loves value, despises all limits. I'm going to read a couple of necropastoral poems, which I started writing thinking through like how humans have kind of impacted just about everything, every climate on Earth, every piece of it. And this one's called Necropastoral for Rare Earths, which I'm reading. I wrote this a while ago before rare earths were like a common topic of discussion, but I got very curious about them and I was interested in the name rare earths, what that meant. So I looked up a bunch of them. Lanthanum, derived from the Greek meaning lanthanian, meaning to be hidden. Catalytic material used in oil refineries, battery electrodes, camera lenses. Dysprosium, from the Greek dysprositos, hard to get, used in disk hard drives, lasers. Neodymium, from the Greek for new twin, used in headphones, cell phones, wind turbines, supermagnets, tanning booths. Promethium, after the Titan Prometheus who brought fire to mortals, used in nuclear batteries and luminous paint. Europium, named for the continent, used in MRIs and the red of color TV. Cerium, named for the goddess of agriculture, used in catalytic converters, blue LEDs, MRIs, yellow ceramics. Thorium, named for the Norse god of thunder, radioactive byproduct of rare earth mining, can replace uranium in nuclear reactors. The truth is, rare earths are common and toxic to process. We buy them from China. Wild rice is the canary in the coal mine, says Beth Dooley, and Lake Superior is a huge and fragile body. These adjectives resist each other. We want the vulnerable to be small for weakness to make sense. Darwin called evolution survival of the fittest, and meant that those who will carry on adapt to their surroundings. The cave moss, Schistostega pinnata, or goblin's gold, thrives on light refracted from a lake. A glow in the damp like a distant city at night, but lusterless in the sun's full light. Rain on the outside, fire on the inside, writes Robin Wall Kemmerer. It is so little, and yet it is enough. This one is another necropastoral that I'm including because we brought our kids here, which is where my husband probably just went to see about. Oh, nice. So, Atticus, you appear in this poem. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Okay. It's called Savagery, or Necropastoral for the Discarded. No, same. Okay. How savage had I become the third time the mill moths returned, fluttering near my door in search of the nuts I had squirreled away for my own young, who wanted to see the dead chipmunk before I unceremoniously tossed her slight, striped, and ant-ridden body into the common garbage bin. My son held his baseball bat over the newly dead and grinned at me. Savage meeting savage. Didn't I breathe my small words of disdain? Pretend I hadn't just crushed the life from 5 filmy winged things and turned my back to my solemn task of throwing the chipmunk away when she deserved to be buried in the ground she had planted with the twisted and ancient oaks I looked to for advice for how to survive such a savage existence. Sorry to throw that surprise on you. You're also in this next poem. I promise not all the poems were about you. You just walked in at the right time. Necropastoral for the Santa Clara River. I just wrote this one today because I was so excited by a thing that we found really close to our hotel, which is in the poem. Having spied the Lost Boys Bridge on the map from the highway from Six Flags Magic Mountain, in whose shadow we'd sleep with the boys for love of justice and solidarity with the teachers' union who were picketing instead of teaching today. We found the Iron Horse trailhead where a sign points languidly to the Oak of the Golden Dream, and within seconds we're there, on the train trestle, where Marco, Dwayne, Paul, and David dropped soundlessly into the fog, entreating Michael to join them. Michael, they whispered, you're one of us. My boys scamper down to the creek like rats who know their way to water, who rush headlong down all the hills to find good mud, good clay, good sand, unafraid of the brush and twisted metal lining the creek's dusty bed. They revel in the sand's glimmering and fragile crust, the sticks they can sever and whip, breaking whatever they choose in this sudden new land of the dead and desiccated plants, who yield such satisfying snap and crunch when their young limbs reduce them to bits that will become soil, become sand, become the dust covering us as we emerge from this ravine, immortal, holy, consecrated again. Thank you for listening to these poems. And I brought my computer that has lots of cover design stuff on it if you guys want to talk about that, but I think Chris is gonna read next, and then we can talk about design stuff later if you want to. Thank you again.
Isn't it nice you have 2 for 1? One reading and you get 2 people. Chris Martin is reading next. Chris Martin is a tilted thinking animal who sways, lights, trees, listens, and arrives. A poet who teaches and learns in mutual measure, he is the connective hub of Unrestricted Interest and the curator of Multiverse, a series of neurodivergent writing from Milkweed Editions. After publishing 4 collections of poetry, including Things to Do in Hell, which is from Coffeehouse Press, 2020, also one of Brian Evans's presses, I'd have to just say, wanted to connect you guys. He released his first book of nonfiction, May Tomorrow Be Awake, on poetry, autism, and our neurodiverse future, from HarperOne in 2022. This is that book, and I read a lot of books about poetry, and this is probably one of the most important books of poetry, about poetry that I've read in the last 10 years. It's really remarkable. Chris lives in El Cerrito, among the scrub jays and coast live oaks with Mary Austin Speaker and their 2 bewildering creatures, one of whom is in here right now. And I just wanted to read a couple of little bits from here, because just to give you a sense of how wonderful this book is. One of the autistic art writers that Chris works with reflected on years working with him and said, operating in poetic expression is very pleasing to my senses. Poetic messages can have a deeper impact on my brain compared to other messages that can be ignored. And in discussing what poetry is, which is always a fun topic to have in writing now, and I think we kind of got sidetracked on that for like 20 minutes or half an hour in our seminar, but I should have just picked up this book because Chris writes, poetry is an art form that can be difficult to pin down. And when people try too hard to pin it down, they often ruin everything that makes poetry magical. When you focus on what poetry is, or worse, should be, you instantly lose the most important thing about the practice of making a poem: what could be. Please help me welcome Chris Martin.
All right. Thank you all for being here, and for the great discussions we had in the class earlier. It was really lovely. I'm going to read a little bit from May Tomorrow Be Awake, and then I'll read from a new project, and then I'll finish with a poem. So I'm going to read from the afterword of May Tomorrow Be Awake, which is, it talks about a new student, Amelia Bell, who I've now been meeting every Friday for, I think, 5 years now. So this was at the start. My newest student is named Amelia Bell. At the beginning of our sessions, she often appears and disappears, moving in and out of the frame, her mother and communication partner Jennifer holding up a finger to indicate, "1 moment, please," before leaving to help Amelia, who is 14, find her way back to the keyboard. Her skittishness is, in many ways, the dance that precedes a deep engagement. Following Amelia's non-speaking lead, we conduct our sessions with the microphones turned off, our exchange of language, always lowercase, occurring solely in the chat. At the beginning of a recent session, Amelia was having a particularly difficult time finding her way to the poem. I asked her what was on her mind, and she typed, "It is a cycle with me of wanting to belong, but not being able to adjust to expectations." We discussed the complexity and importance of belonging. When she typed, "This is hard for me to admit," I replied, you admit it to open ears." And this is Amelia's poem, "We Are Other Together." The reason I weaken, the yearning, I am broken. I am other, the anger of my raving, the anger of my fate, the monster in my ether. Say other, say anger, say wrong, say other. Am other, not alone, am other, am other. I am other, I am half a part, I am danger. I am the risk, the deviant, the idiot, the other, the nothing. I am here. I am hearing, I am. Am other, am angry, am alone, am among a song, among a wisp of great knowledge, a wisp of ambition, a wisp of other. Am winding, am diving, am seeing, am belonging, am other together. As this poem unfolded over one session and then a second, I could feel the power of the poem growing. The complex beauty of its belonging, making room for further fractaling complexity and greater depth. When Amelia was done, she wrote, "That felt so good." I can only aspire to the courage I perceive in this poem, its yearning and raw embodiment, its waves of vulnerable insistence. I like to think many of us, myself included, have grown more adept at tapping into our own varied courageousnesses over the past year. A poem like this feels, to me, like an anchor point, a glimpse at how much farther and deeper we can go. No matter how angry or alone or other we feel, to be among a song means that we have an abundance of resources. To be other together is a way of harmonizing through the necessary troubles, not alighting difference, but leaning into it, winding, diving, seeing, belonging. As a child, as a young man, as a writer and a teacher and a father, I felt and continue to feel a distinct longing to find connection. I want to find that connection with others like and unlike me, poets and neurodivergent dancers and sensitive seekers among song. And finding ways to be other together is what this moment in history, what all moments in history beckon toward. Can we forge complex solidarities? Can we identify the vast untaught curriculum where our differences bridge and instruct us? Can we dissolve the false borders that keep us separate while acknowledging the gifts and needs that make us unique? Can we source the material and spiritual pathways that allow us to create, as Hannah wrote, most pleasing networks where our collective needs and gifts intersect? Can we replace the systems built to fabricate our brokenness and ensure that everyone has access to a flourishing that is mutual? Can our justice, inviting transformation and abolishing punishment, be our joy? Can I listen and sing and find ease with you and also you and also you? These are the questions I feel called to, the questions that draw me deeper into belonging with my students who have become my collaborators, mentors, and friends, poets and people like Amelia. Every time we choose to be other together again, we reimagine what it is to belong, and it feels good. Forgot the water. All right, so for those of you who have not read May Tomorrow Be Awake, about 10 years ago, I co-founded an organization called Unrestricted Interest that we call a home for neurodivergent listening, languaging, and learning. And we have worked with hundreds of neurodivergent students. And at this point, most of our work is with non-speaking autistic students. And those students have been more influential to me as a poet than probably anything else I've encountered in my life. And so I really want, this book was like a showcase for the students. I really wanted their work to get out there and to be seen, and to hopefully make a case for the importance of communication supports for non-speaking autistic writers especially, but for the possibility of creative expression for all neurodivergent learners. And then I've been writing a thing, I wrote a whole book that was actually going to be published by University Press. And then I realized I didn't want to publish it. It was both too personal and too academic, and those things like did not feel good together. And so I'd heard Taika Waititi, the director, talking about his process of writing screenplays, where he writes it, sets it aside for a year, and then rewrites it from memory. And so it had been a long time since I had gone back to the manuscript, and I thought, oh yeah, that's what I'll do. And so I just started rewriting it from memory, and wrote this whole new book called A Field Guide to Tilted Thinking. And it just goes from like little paragraph to little paragraph. And that felt really doable. And as a poet and as someone with a chronic illness, I'm always trying to figure out like what is like the shape, the vessel that's gonna be able, I can kind of pour a little into it whenever I can. And that turned out to be a great form. So I'll read a little bit from it. I won't like tell you where the changes are, and they have little titles and stuff, but we'll just read through. The only thing that you probably need to know is that phrase tilted thinking comes from a student, Amen Bukela, who I talk about in May Tomorrow Be Awake. And that was an instance of me like realizing, okay, you know, was diagnosed with ADHD as a child. I had got an autistic diagnosis like 6 years ago, right when I was kind of finishing this book, which felt really interesting since I've been working, and my students were the ones who pushed me to explore it, of course. And it was really complicated because it's really simple when you're like, okay, I'm the not autistic person who's holding up these autistic writers, but then it's like, okay, what happens if I'm also an autistic writer, and like, how does that work? And when Amen wrote about tilted thinkers in a poem, I was just like, immediately it felt so resonant to me. And I realized that it was like, okay, like, of course it takes some work to like rearrange your like standpoint and positionality to be like, yeah, I'm also an autistic writer, but then what happens to go beyond that to give yourself specific language to describe who you think you are? And so being a tilted thinker felt like, that's right, that's what feels right to me. So I will mention Amen here in a second. And this begins with a discussion about like how we think spatially about neurodivergence. Instead of the line and its polar limitations of the spectrum, high, low, mild, severe, we could imagine ourselves inside a different kind of shape, a different structure. We could tilt the line and realize it's actually the edge of something much more substantial, a multidimensional space that could hold many of us at the same time. And crucially, it might be a space able to hold all our differences intact, even as it allows us to see the ways in which we overlap or converge or trespass false boundaries, to forge solidarities where they are needed most. Perhaps it could speak more to tendencies than to diagnoses. Along these lines, I found the writing of Nathan Snaza to be incredibly helpful. How do we tend toward one another, even or especially across difference? How do we tend each other in this tending, offering support without letting that support be co-opted by the tendency of society to see such support as always moving from those with more power to those with less? Where does mutuality emerge in the support we seek? My dear friend Heidi Andrea Restrepo Rhodes gifted us a name for this process: mutual pedagogy. We teach each other. We each teach alongside the others, making space for whatever might emerge in the middle, in the intersection, in the overlap, but also at the periphery. A few years back, Amen and I were presenting to a group of teachers who were seeking advanced degrees in education. One of them asked Amen how it was that she came to trust me as a teacher. Amen wrote, "Chris was ready to meet me at the periphery." I was so honored by those words. And like her tilted thinking, they stayed with me as a way to describe what often happens when I meet neurodivergent writers for the first time. We glide right past all the expected, enforced, small talk, and meet at the periphery where things are already veering and tilting and spinning with centrifugal effulgences. Another way to see the periphery is an edge at the edge of other edges. Sometimes this is called an ecotone, a place where different ecosystems intersect and where diversity deepens. It might be where the field meets the marsh, or where a traditional field guide meets whatever this is. It's a place where living folds into living, a margin where animacy is rife. I tend to see the world this way. In fact, I try always to tend the world as a composite of interwoven entities that all need care and company, that need attendance. I know that I'm far from alone in this tending, especially when we take into account indigenous cosmologies, which predominantly reveal an animist view. It's been a great joy of mine when I am in conversation with other tilted thinkers to find that many of them also ground their thinking in this premise, that the world is essentially and non-hierarchically alive. This is just one tendency that I perceive as cutting across or binding the thoughts and actions of tilted thinkers, but I think it's a fundamental one. Sometimes this can appear to others as a symptom that we are too alive in our tending to the world, and consequently not alive enough when it comes to our tending of neurotypicality. We often see, hear, smell, taste, and touch too much. We become too excited about the sensations we find. We might become overstimulated or might talk too much, or we might move in ways that are too playful and ecstatic to satisfy the demands of neuronormative comportment. We might seem to explode with feeling. As another of my student turned mentors, Hannah Emerson writes, "It's okay to be the fool you are, helping this great universe explode." I identify with that line. I have been branded a fool since I was in elementary school. My childhood friend Brian used to say, "You're either the smartest dumb guy in the world or the dumbest smart guy." He loved me, but he also found me hapless and impractical. I lacked common sense. I lacked street smarts. I was found to be naive, foolish, and maybe even a little pitiful. And although I have learned quite a bit about the world and how it works since then, I still am a fool. I persist in my foolishness. But I've learned how that foolishness has been the conduit for many of the things I hold most dear: my friendships, my livelihood, my loves. I tend to dive headlong toward what intrigues me. That's what they say, right? Only fools rush in. I was foolish when I began working with autistic students in the mid-aughts. Everyone knew at that time that autistic people did not possess theory of mind, the ability to imagine the world from another's perspective. They even, it was suspected, lacked the very ability to empathize. They were locked in their own world. How grateful I am that I knew not a lick of this when I began my life as an educator. And thank fool I didn't credit a shred of it once I grew curious enough to read the psychological literature. In this way, foolishness can also be a form of knack. It is canny to stay naive when the sources of knowledge ring false. A tilted thinker can often perceive these sorts of fractures where others miss them, tender points where the literature and the world are misaligned, or else they simply feel their way into the gap. The autistic students I met in those early years felt kindred, and it was no struggle for me to see the brilliant things they were doing with language. It was as if I was programmed to spot the patterns. Sometimes I call tilted thinkers seers of the veer, adept at noting the moment where something veers away from expectation and towards something much more exciting. I want to suggest that this veer seeing happens most often in the peripheral. Not only does it happen in the corner of one's eye, in the respite from direct eye contact, but also that it is a seeing made possible by more than seeing. I want to suggest that catching the veer involves the whole body. Seeing might happen with the eye, but it's also enmeshed with all sorts of other sensory orientations occurring throughout the body. The peripheral is activated by these other orientations, which coax seeing toward a greater attention. There's a feeling in the body, a nebulous apprehension, and the body kind of taps sight on the shoulder, notifying it, asking it to note what is being noted. So often we mistake perception for intuition just because we can't pinpoint the origin of its quiet broadcast. Or perhaps I want to suggest that perception is intuition and vice versa. Just as the mind cannot be separated, just as the body and mind cannot be separated, neither can our hunches be untwined from our senses. And then, in an entirely different direction, I've talked about this a little bit in class today. I've become totally obsessed with Welsh medieval poetry and the Welsh medieval bard Taliesin. And so he is a mythological poetic figure in the Welsh canon, kind of stands in for like the poet. Might have been a real person, we're not really sure, but we do know that in the centuries after there was a so-called Taliesin, it was kind of a very important kind of rite of passage for a poet, a bard who thought himself to be like immense enough to do this, to proclaim a poem as Taliesin. And so we don't know, and I should say bard was not restricted by gender. There's amazing female identifying bards in the Welsh tradition going back 600 years. But you get up and proclaim a poem as Taliesin. And so in the book of Taliesin, we don't really know who wrote what, and it's kind of like a tradition to rewrite Taliesin or to be Taliesin. So I ended up undertaking this project to rewrite all of Taliesin's legendary poems, which are the really exciting ones. And there's a term here, awen, A-W-E-N, and it most directly translates to like inspiration, but it's much bigger than that. I would love to sit here and tell you the story of Taliesin and Cerrito, the Welsh witch goddess, but what is important to know is that the broth of awen that she brewed and that Taliesin either accidentally or intentionally got onto his hand and became a seer and the greatest bard, that it is something that continues to be boiling in a cauldron in the other world, which is both here and not here. It's not a kind of thing that's like below us necessarily or up in heaven. It's like a thing that's here, well, where we are, but in a thin place that's like another dimension. So the idea is that for Awen, it's not just inspiration, but like you're literally, to use another immense terms, insufflating the fumes of the broth of Awen from the other world. And then you get filled with this spirit that you're able to orate in such a way that you can literally make language material so that it can transform the earth and transform the reality of the earth. Okay, little thing. So here's a poem. And there's also some there's a lot of kind of battle rap in Welsh medieval poetry. So you'll hear a little of that in here. And this is for my friend Sid Ghosh, who you may have read about in Make Tomorrow Be Awake. It's called 9 Meditations on Hunting. Breathlessly, recklessly, I beg the animals. I summon sun and river. Give me wind that I might, like a flesh leaf, hear and sing the origins of Awen. What thirsting and reaching first warmed in its otherness before even it grazed the lips of great hags? What nothing coaxed it into song? What weirding tongue carved it onto bright pages of air? You who still call yourself poet, dry as August blossoms, dust shriveled with infertile thought, do you know that you do not know? My hunt begins in the damp. Milk and mushroom, dark stone split by the spring, tireless well, where the need for song drowns speaking. This is where my feet squelch, my fingernails deep in red moss, my nose wet with itching mist, the roof of my mouth a scooped cave where even bats cannot sleep easy. Here is where I hear the froth gather, others into chorus, perched at the lip of a cauldron lit by the cold blue fire of nothing itself. I hunt what undoes all knowing. I thrust backwards in opening the nest of zero and its meniscus of awe, which can hoist mountains upon its curve. All day I read so-called books, endless dehydrated pages, none of them daring to imagine the soul of a louse. All day the hunt continues, stream churning its notes upon the speck world of green algae threaded together in plumes of dancing beard after beard flowing over the rock faces that tumble below. All night I bubble and rise, desperate, yeast courting derangement at the caldera's edge, head thrown back in black, dank, and ecstatic star tides. If you say death is what lies beneath the crowning stone, I say look again. Death is but a minor lichen on the heart of nothing, a black mold that hides Awen's mystery from darting eyes. Be instead like the heron whose nose points like a broken clock at the quivering fish. Nothing is inside the hazelnut, inside the salmon, inside the stream, inside the eye, which must cast a net of unwavering love. If I have insulted you, it's only because you have no practice of love, which emerges always from the split fishnet crazing of death's relent. Our hunt is the sliver's fill, the throbbing song of a crevice teeming till parted by claw and moss. Our hunt is the green of life dying into growth, the fissure's pleasure at having found itself an orgy of nothing, an open cleft where the very earth burbles. Awen, Awen, Awen. You gonna come on? Should we do questions and talk about stuff? So we figured we'd stick around for some questions and then also maybe talk a little about our collaboration on the Multiverse series that we do for Milkweed.
And I brought some of those books. You guys can see them. Do you want to just tell them what the Multiverse series?
Yeah, sure. So some people will be familiar with Hannah Emerson's work and Adam Walfon's work, which is coming up here too. It was very clear, so I had been working with them through Unrestricted Interest, and it was clear that they were going to have like real books out in the world. And I was unclear whether we should just look for like the ideal publisher for each of those books, or whether like a series might both be better for the writers and for, in some ways, the world. And one of the problems with being a non-speaking autistic poet is that you're often seen as the exception, like the one miracle child or miracle adult who can actually write even though you have no speech. And so these writers were really interested in being together in some way so people could see, like, not only are there many non-speaking autistic writers, but also that they're very different. They write very differently. And so I had a conversation with the publisher of Milkweed, Daniel Schlager, and by the end of it, he was like, I think it should be a series, and I think it should be here, which was great because Mary is the creative director, and so then I knew that the books could be designed in a way that would fit the visions of these writers.
And we had also been already collaborating on publishing chapbooks by Chris's students through his organization, Unrestricted Interest.
Yeah, I love chapbooks. For those who don't know what a chapbook is, it comes from the German word for cheap, but it would be like back in the day, someone would come around and be peddling these chapbooks, which would be these cheaply produced little like tracks. They could be political tracks or they could be poetry. And then it became like a really big deal in especially the 60s and 70s with the mimeograph revolution, where poets were like basically making magazines and little books like constantly, like churning these out, and it is amazing artifacts. And chapbooks can be really high art, so that like, you know, each one costs like $100 and is in a center for book arts, or it can be like you literally just like copied it off somewhere and you just want to give it away for free, you know, very DIY.
Yeah. Very much like that. The one that he's mentioning just now is like based on the reading culture, the culture of poets giving readings, and then like just having something to give people to take away from the reading as like a little memento or talisman. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted the students who worked at Unrestricted Interest to have that possibility to be like published poets and to start with a chapbook and see how that goes. And we've now published, I think, more than 40 chapbooks. You can go to unrestrictedinterest.com and you can see all the chapbooks that are available for sale. But then, yeah, so then, and people have been reading some of these chapbooks and have been blown away. And at first it's like, I don't know, like, is this just me? Do I just love this? Does it, you know, is this gonna be things other people love? And it's been really exciting to see, like, Hannah, by the time May Tomorrow Be Awake came out, Hannah had already had like a glowing review in the New York Times of this book, The Kissing of Kissing, which I think is the best book of poetry of this millennium.
It's really good.
No big deal.
I also want to just note that we, one of the things that we really wanted to offer to the Multiverse poets was the ability to use color in their work, because it's not a typical move for books of poetry to have color in them.
Yeah.
But because Milkweed is a nonprofit press, we can spend a little bit extra on things like this because we fundraise around like making the object of the book something that's actually really serving the art and not just the market.
And one of the nice things about like neurodiversity becoming a kind of buzzword is that you can get a lot of grants. And especially if you're doing really good work, it's like, all right, fine, give us a bunch of grants. But for instance, with Adam, who's a writer in Toronto, a non-speaking autistic poet who lives in Toronto, an artist, late in the game, Adam wrote that he wanted an actual one-teen way. It's called the one-teen way, but an actual one-teen way moving through the entire book, like a line. He thinks of it like a stream or also like a piece of yarn. And so I literally came up from the session and was like, over lunch, like, can we do this?
So I
Is
was
this
thinking
possible?
about the hours that would take me.
And we had this brilliant designer, Tikwa, who is now the designer for all the Unrestricted Interest chapbooks. And they were like, yeah, I want to do that.
Yep.
And so there's this line that goes over
Which
each
is
page.
in blue. I don't know if you can see it.
It's in blue, and it circles like one word per page, which Adam thinks of as like close-ups. And it's just amazing.
Yeah,
But
and
the-
it really represents something that like Adam's autistic mind brings to languaging and language making and reading that's much different than what we would publish without a line like this.
Right, I mean, there's just never been a book that's done this, which is really exciting when you can work on books where nothing has ever been done like it before. It caused a problem because Adam also really wanted marginalia. He wanted there to be like text on the side that disrupted like the regular way you read. And then but we couldn't have it perfectly going from page to page exactly over the margin if that was the case. So then he asked the designer to pour a ponding of the marginalia along the bottom of the book. And so there are these blue phrases every so often at the bottom of the book.
Yeah, so these books represent a much more collaborative process between the designer and the writer than is typical for trade book publishing. And and so even
Sorry
with,
about asking.
yeah,
And this is one of the great things for me, like another thing about it being a series is that it creates, like I talked about in all this, right, like complex solidarities. So the idea that this isn't just a series for non-speaking autistic poets, it's for neurodivergent writing. And we think about that extremely broadly. And Jerome Ellis, who's a stutterer and a musician and a poet, was really connected to the work that was being done and thinks of their stuttering as being in the same family as autistic aphasia or apraxia. And so Jerome was already reading Adam's work and was so influenced by the blue line that Jerome decided that they really wanted an aster-colored line, or aster-colored words in the book. So every time a plant is mentioned in this book, which is mentioned a lot, it's in purple. And these are all poems that are engagements with what are generally called escaped slave advertisements. And so Jerome went into the archive and researched what Jerome refers to as ancestors. So enslaved ancestors who took their freedom and who were marked as stutterers. And so he takes the advertisements and then basically remixes them to create new poems.
yeah, and created these benedictions, which were these kind of almost operatic kind of musical compositions for each of the people, and imagined which plants would be growing when they took their freedom.
The big question that we talked about was how can we resist the myth that these people who were taking their freedom were essentially alone.
Yeah.
And we're not, accompanied. And Jerome, who loves plants so much, and whose wife is a botanist, they were like, well, we need to figure out what plants were blooming at the exact time in this place where this ancestor took their freedom. And so researched it, and sometimes does like 6-hour-long singing performances where they just sing the names of all the flowers that were blooming for this particular ancestor.
Yeah, and I just want to show this one. This page was shown at the Whitney Biennial as when Jerome was included in that.
Yeah.
That was a very exciting moment. I got that call. Yeah, and that says the rose of the stutterer shall grow through the fence of prose. Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about here, but it's a kind of unique series of books. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
This is kind of just a more broad, general poetry publishing thing.
Yeah.
But most of my work is in cut-ups or in but typically for like stories, like published stories, and a lot of them are older, but I've never known how to go about presenting them to people because I'm always like, this is my work, but also this is someone else's work, and I'm
Yeah.
always a little bit anxious to show those to people,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to publishing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because it's not too dissimilar from the collages that Lauren made for this book. Lauren Russell created these little collages that appear throughout this book, and they're all made with like other people's work, right? It's very similar to collage work, and I've worked with other collage artists, and some of them are super rigorous about making sure that every single thing is pre-copyrighted. But as a designer, I'm always using stuff that I'm trying to find out there on the internet that's like rights free, et cetera. And I think the artistic practice of collaging those into something new is what makes it yours.
Yeah.
So I'm very much in favor of just being like, send it out. And Chris can talk about that too because he used so many quotations from song lyrics in his first book.
Yeah, my first book is called American Music, and it has an epigraph, Plagiarism is Necessary, by Guy Debord. Yeah, I mean, I think that, and the press made me sign a contract that if they got sued, I would be responsible for any of the like quotations. And it's really, really tricky territory because no one knows how much of a song you can quote because they don't know, is it the amount of time in the song that it would take to sing it, which it normally is with samples, or is it the amount of words? There's like a gray area, but I never got sued. But I do think that like just including like a process note is really, and it's such an important thing to develop anyways, to like communicate what your vision is and how you worked with the material. But yeah.
Have you ever worked with any neurodivergent students who did take to something that wasn't poetry, like that like struggled with something that free form, but something else worked better?
Yeah, and like I said in class, like Amen, who wrote Trusting Emotions at Edge Mistakes, she thinks of all of her writing as rap, and so that's like its own kind of question.
Yeah, and this is a very hybrid book as well. It's very much like in between poetry and prose, and there's a lot of it comes across as prose, but we don't really worry too much about that. I feel like poetry is a big umbrella.
Well, it's also it's really interesting. You like learn about how we think about language when a lot of the non-speaking autistic writers really like strongly identify as poets, but they weren't necessarily seeking to write poetry. Like how they communicate is just
Poetic.
it's just poetry in the way that we view it. So that's where it got like positive reactions from people. We're like, oh, this is poetry, and they're like, okay, this is poetry. But it wasn't like they didn't set out to write poetry. And it can be very interesting, like communicating with Hannah, or with Amen. You want to show them the space storms? So we talked about this in class today. Like when you ask Amen a question about the typography of the book, Amen will basically respond in a poem. And then you kind of have to figure out like, okay, what do we feel this means? And then you kind of try to like get confirmation with her. And one thing that she really wanted was space storming of the words,
So she
the
like
typography.
gave me the words, and then kind of I got a little sort of a scribbly sketch that was like, make it go like this. So I made it go like that. And there's a lot of other stuff like that in this book.
Yeah. Another like half of Unrestricted Interest, the other half is songwriting. So there's a lot of songwriters who we work with, and often the poets are also songwriters. And some are interested in prose and short stories and plays. So yeah, very open to all of it. Is there a genre you were thinking of specifically?
No, I was just thinking that I really struggle with poetry. That's
Yeah.
like my least. I feel the most uncomfortable if I have to write a poem. And I'm just curious if that's something that you've come across where a student is, when you're like, try writing a poem, and they're like against it, but it's easier to write something that's not a poem.
Yeah. And I don't, when I first work with someone, I almost never say like, all right, let's write a poem. It's more just like, we just start like, often it's this interesting experience, like I said, with the peripheral thing. It's like, they will say something, and I will like, not just kind of meet where it is, but go like, way up beyond, like, all right, not just presuming competence, but I'm presuming you are brilliant. We're gonna have an awesome, brilliant conversation. And like I would with almost anyone I talk to. And so I go here and they're like, wait, we're going there? And then then they go here, and then it's like keeps going up, and then at a certain point they're just like, all right, I wanna write. And then they write something. And then it's up to me, it's my job, is to figure out like, how do you see this on the page? Like, what does it look like? Does it have line breaks? Is it capitalized? There's just like all these things to try to figure out, like how to translate that to a visual medium. But yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah, no, go for it.
No.
No, I had a kind of question. So, I think it's so inspiring to me, like this story and how you kind of get people published. And I guess I'm kind of curious, I guess, for that moment where it goes to, this is this really cool, like, way, like, you're able to communicate to, like, oh my god, this is something that we could publish, kind of, we could do. Just because I think, at least to me, publishing feels like such an intimate kind of thing.
Yeah.
And scary things. Like, I want to know what's the process of being like, okay, this is like, of kind of going from like just communication to like, I guess, I don't know if that's clear. I don't know. It feels like a really interesting, and like, I don't know. I can see it being a potentially super exciting, potentially very scary. Like, I don't know.
It all depends on the writer, and like with Hannah, who is like arguably the most famous of the writers in the series, she doesn't care at all. She really wants to like the poems to. What she like, why it's called the kissing of kissing, is that she sees these poems as kissing other people, and then like maybe writing more poems or whatever. But that she has like zero interest in like fame or any reception of any kind. She's like, I just want to hang out in my house and like outside of Syracuse, New York, and write these poems once a week and do some art and some other things, but like thinks it's really awesome that the poems are kissing people, and being like, there was like a vocal performance at Lincoln Center last year of like someone who had adapted the poems for like song presentation, and her work's been like all these other things. She's like, oh, that's like a Guggenheim. They asked her to write like a access statement about entering the Guggenheim, and it's like, sure, I'll write a poem. But then Sid, who's our newest poet, Sid Ghosh, who is a non-speaking autistic poet with Down syndrome who lives in Portland, was very interested in being part of the poetry world and like meeting other poets and having that kind of belonging and comradeship, and we just had to wait a little bit because Sid, like a lot of the poems Sid wrote in this book were written when he was 13 and 14, and we knew that it would freak people out more that he was like, if we published a book when he was 15, than that he had Down syndrome and was a non-speaking autistic writer. There's just we have this like idea about age that's like really intense.
But during that time, you also shuffled his work towards some San Francisco chapbook publishers who just went bananas for it and published a couple of chapbooks of Sid's before we published.
Sid's like your favorite poet's favorite poet.
He was recently called at a reading a master of poetic idiom, which I thought was a really wonderful phrase for him. But also Lauren teaches creative writing at Johns Hopkins, I think. And
Lauren's full name?
what's that?
Lauren Russell.
Lauren Russell.
Oh, I went to undergrad at Johns Hopkins.
Really?
I had a writing seminar for undergrads from Johns Hopkins.
Did you? I think she's only been teaching there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't think I had her class, but I know who she is and I've heard really good things.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, she's brilliant. This book is fantastic, especially if you are a cat person. If you cat people, please read this book. This is for you. But she really wanted to take like, there are these things in here that are these they're like dyes, we wound up putting them together like this, so you could cut them out of the book and tape them together, and like all the faces of the die are printed in here, and there's a little instruction manual on the side about where they go on the die face. She wanted these to be published as like gatefolds, which is where the page folds out, and that was prohibitively expensive. Like literally doubled the cost of the book to just put 2 gatefolds in it. So we came up with another solution, but and Lauren has a lot of wild typography in her book too, which she did this herself. But I'm just, this is a 6-sided die, I think, if I have that right.
No, it's more, right?
And
Oh, no, it is, yeah.
maybe, yeah.
That was
And
a
she also
12-sided die.
12-sided die. And she, this one we actually published as a broadside, so that you could actually cut it apart and make it into a die. And she had a fabricator make like a wooden version of this and stuck the poems to all the faces, and then would like roll it at readings and then choose whatever was on top to read.
The idea is that chance determines the sequence of the
Yes.
stanzas
Yes.
of the poem.
Yeah, the subtitle of this book is Poems, Plots, Chants. Just noting that as I think she had more fine art hopes for the book than we could provide as a trade publisher, because we kind of have to like make things sort of affordable to publish. But that's my job as a designer, is to kind of like get us from dream to reality and find something that everybody's gonna be happy with at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I'm a graphic designer who's my primary in creative writing, so I'm really curious about like, I guess the clients that you've worked with in the past, and I don't know, maybe just talking a little bit about how I don't know, your position as both designer and writer in the worlds that you dabble in, whether that's for yourself, for like this nonprofit organization, or for whoever else is out there.
Yeah, I mean, I started out at like big trade houses, working for like Simon & Schuster and HarperOne, and like kind of getting my start as a book designer, like learning how to do any kind of book. Like I did business books, health books, cookbooks.
But interiors.
Interiors, yeah. So I got really good at black and white type design and like how a book works. And then I kind of eventually graduated into covers. But I began like doing covers for like really small presses that were just looking for more designers, and that honestly didn't have great design. The thing is, like, if you can find a press that like doesn't look that great, I hate to say this, but there are a lot of them out there. And like offer your services, you're more likely to like land something, because they'll be like, oh, we need somebody like you, you know. But also like I took some printmaking classes, like letterpress classes at SVA when I was like working at HarperOne. They would pay my tuition for some art classes, and like made these little chapbooks where I could just like do everything exactly how I wanted it. While I was like doing all these other books for other people, I was building up all these skills, and then I would like go to the art studio and make my own stuff. And being able to have those little things that you can give out and be like, I made this, so that people can tap you when they're like ready to make something. That's key. Also, like if you know anybody whose work you think is really amazing, just publish it. You know, if you're a graphic designer, it's very easy to just like put a book out there, and then you have a press, and then you can say you have a press. It's really that's all you have to do.
It's such a mystery. Like,
It's not a mystery. Yeah, I invented my own press before while I was working at another press. Yes.
Thinking with Type is one of my all-time favorite books.
Oh, nice.
What other books could you recommend that are cool in terms of like designing things, but that are also really have some interesting language? Because I think a lot of the section on like paragraph breaks is so poetic and cool in that.
Yeah, The Elements of Typographic Style by Robert Bringhurst is like
Another
the
favorite.
Bible. Yeah, that's really the one that I recommend to everybody. And honestly, like I don't read that much about design. I just look at a lot of things. I spend a lot of time in bookstores. I like freak out whenever I go into bookstores because it's what's in my head all day. But like walking into a bookstore and being all of a sudden faced with like 2 million options of what you could have done instead of the things that you did, and what other people are choosing to do, and like how are they doing that, and like it's just an amazing field to be in. did a restaurant menu once. We got free food for a while, so this is very good. Yeah, occasionally I'll do some things for people who are looking for a designer, but honestly I've been working in book publishing since I graduated, even before I graduated from college, and I've been like working the whole time. So I haven't really needed to branch out very much. I also got, so because I was working in interior book design, I got really fixated on typography. And I do think that is the route to excellent cover design. Typography will make or break a cover design. But when you are designing for the web, typography is harder to manage. And I haven't like made the leap in like learning much about web fonts and how you can like have a website download the font and like make that the font that's on the website now. So I respect that there's really beautiful websites coming out, but there is a kind of sameness to web design that I resist. And this is one of the things that I really like about books and about print, is that each book is totally unique. Like, this is not my style, this is my collaboration with a bunch of writers. And that's what you'll, like, I can show you like a kind of sampling of my work, but it is very, very collaborative. And I'm like an inherently kind of anti-hierarchical person. I really like collaboration and conversation and what comes out of that. And I like being kind of the person who can figure out what's at the center of the Venn diagram for like what the author wants, what I think is beautiful, and what's going to sell, you know? So that's lots of fun, yeah.
I have a question for both of you, which is, a lot of this is really experimental work that you're putting out. So it's kind of a double-sided question, which is like, what is sad, what is not as sad? But like, what is the most devastating no you've had to give to somebody, and then what is the most exciting yes you've given someone in terms of like publishing their idea, or like making their idea materialize on a page?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I have to say no to a lot of people, because I also read manuscripts for Milkweed, so I have to say no to people who submit their manuscripts and they have agents, you know, really going to bat for them.
And you had to say no about design elements.
Yeah, I do occasionally have to say no about design elements, but it's not that often, you know. I feel like usually we can get on the same page in terms of design. Having to say no to whole books that I would love to publish but can't is the harder thing, and I can't really tell you because that would be really bad for them and not good for my reputation. But there are some people whose books I would have loved to have published, but I just knew that it wasn't going to work out very well for either of us. But that's the thing about, sometimes you have to say no to something knowing that somebody else is going to publish that book and they're going to do it better than you. There's a lot of publishers out there. So when somebody comes to me and says, I want you to publish my book, I have to think about what our press does really well. And that's the stuff that I say yes to. Because if I know that it's going to be kind of iffy, like we don't publish children's literature, for instance. And sometimes people will come to me with like YA books that I think are amazing, but we don't publish YA books. So even though it might kind of hit a lot of our boxes, if our marketing team isn't already in relationship with the people who review YA books, then I have no business saying yes to that book. So publishers are set up with like a team of people who have really strong strengths, and they have a bench of folks who are good at that thing. So if you're looking to publish, definitely find the press that's like in your wheelhouse, because they're going to be able to do the best for you, because they're going to know where those readers are and where the reviewers are who can be sympathetic to that kind of work and be excited about it. So when all those things align, it's really fun. It's really fun because you're like, yes, they get it. They're talking about it publicly. This is awesome. Yeah. And it's really, really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like with Jennifer Bowen, that was probably the most exciting yes for you.
Totally. Yeah. That probably was maybe the most exciting yes. This woman, Jennifer Eli Bowen, whose book we just published, which I acquired and edited and did the cover and all that. She's the founding director of the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop. And she had this wonderful book of essays that was, in her mind, it was about abandonment, and in my mind, it was about care. Like, we came to this place where it wound up being called the Book of Ken, on love, absence, and being there. And and it's been getting a lot of really wonderful attention from people who really, really profoundly get it and see exactly what I saw in it. So that's really gratifying to kind of like have a hunch about a book and like something that needs to be out there in the world that you know people are hungry for, you know? That's kind of part of it, is like keeping your ears open to like, what are people hungry for? What do I want to find in the world that I'm not seeing out there? And when that aligns with what my press is good at, it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. It's super generous of your time. Maybe we could continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Again, less formally, we can get up and walk around and have some more snacks.
Thank you so much. became clear after a little while, just needs to be one word per line. And a lot of it is like, it works to, it's going to be called reality.
And so I texted earlier, I said,
It's just like,
I just feel like it was great. I ended up in
it's just like, no, look at this word.
By that, I mean, I thought it was
Exactly.
it had
And then
like
here's another word, and it's just like,
It's like,
boom, this is great.
That's all I need.
Do you publish any of these with multimedia content, like there's bars of music in one of the ones you're showing, but is there also like tube links to hear the music? Or?
Or an entire audiobook.
Appreciate it, Susie.
Jerome includes his, there's biography of the writing, so they recorded, basically like one repetition of the letter for